I'm Richard James Burgess, President and CEO of A2IM, the American Association of Independent Music. Welcome to Indiscussion. Today, we're going to discuss live streaming gigs and how the pivot to digital is directly affecting labels. We have a power-packed panel today who are eminently qualified to speak on this topic. We have Darius Van Arman, founder of Jagjaguwar, co-CEO of Secretly Group and Secretly Distribution, Jason Peterson, chairman of Go Digital Group and CEO at Content Bridge, Ruth Barlow, director of live licensing at Beggars Group, and Carrie Boston, general counsel at Secretly Group and Secretly Distribution. And I want to say this panel is an example of the kinds of expertise and discussions you'll be able to see at Indie Week that happens from June 15th to June 18th, and we certainly hope you can join us then. In a challenging time when live gigs are impossible, it's important that artists have an outlet and a means to earn revenue. And to that end, we've been supporting the Road List series by Road Nation. What our panel will discuss today are business and ethical implications for rights owners. So Jason, do you want to take that angle and talk to us a little bit about the business and ethical issues of live?
Yeah, sure. Just to, I think, lay the groundwork for the discussion, we're all gathering here today to talk about live streaming because it feels a lot like YouTube circa 2006. It's the Wild West. A lot of people are engaging. We as labels and rights holders want to ensure that we're involved in the development of the business model to ensure value is created for labels, for artists, for rights holders. And therefore, we're having the conversation. I think that if we don't have this conversation, it's likely that you'll see a lot of value being shifted to other players in the value chain in the same way that we've seen that happen with services like YouTube over the years.
Thank you. Yeah. I know, Darius, you have a particular angle on this. Obviously, this is a way that artists can make money. How are you guys handling it?
Well, from our vantage point, we see this more of an issue not between artists and creators and songwriters and the label. I feel like we're fairly aligned in that we want to make sure that there's not opportunistic platforms or companies out there who are taking advantage of artists and recording rights at this time when artists are looking to replace the income they're losing because they can't do live performances. So I think there's a lot of things that have to be worked out. Carrie, our general counsel, who's joining me on this panel, she can talk about what's happening with our business affairs department on this front. But I think from our perspective, we're looking to create some sort of framework which will really enable artists to be able to flourish in this time while they have other opportunities that are lost to them.
Thank you. I know, Ruth, I mean, you and I have talked about this endlessly in different contexts over the years, and this is not really a new concept, is it? But it's the same problem that we've been dealing with in one context or another.
It is. Actually, before this meeting, I sort of like tried to look back. You'll have to excuse me, it's the clapping for the NHS going on outside, which is very loud. But I had to look back, and actually I've been holding sort of informal discussions at South by since about 2013 about this very subject. So it's definitely not news to me, and definitely what I dedicate about 90% of my time doing every day. Live streaming is not a new thing. The principles that we're being faced with today are what we've been faced with before. I'd agree with Darius. There's there's a lot of loose flying platforms around. There's a lot of there's a lot of organizations coming above the parapets that are offering certain things, and we just need to be very mindful about what they're offering and whether they're the right sort of platforms for our artists, because this is a great opportunity. I mean, I certainly never thought that a global pandemic would be the catalyst for all the conversations that I've been having for almost a decade,
I know. It's well, it's never a dull moment, is it? So Carrie, what are the typical label rights when an artist participates in a live stream? Oh, mic. Carrie, your mic is muted.
Yeah, so for a lot of recording artists, their deals are going to have an exclusivity concept in there. Obviously, deals vary greatly, but for an artist who has an exclusive recording agreement, their rights to be filmed or recorded, or whether it's audio or audio visual, are going to be subject to their recording agreements, which means that if a festival in the normal, what would normally be happening right now, if a festival wanted to record one of our artists, they would have to come to us as label to get permission. So the same thing is happening in the live streaming world, where these platforms are coming to us for permission. The artists don't have the rights to do this without it coming through us. There's also some aspects of the recording agreement, such as a re-record restriction, meaning that, you know, masters that are subject to a recording agreement can't be recorded for release during some period of time. That would be like the same master recording. So there are protections in the agreement, which is why, as label, and you know, Ruth is dealing with this as well, we are getting inundated with requests right now, because in place of these festivals and sessions that would normally be happening for artists who are on tour, we are getting them for, you know, 5 or 6 different platforms a day coming in and wanting our artists to participate in live streams.
Right, thank you. So I mean, we've talked about granting a license, but you can grant a license or you can waive exclusivity. I don't know if one of you wants to take that as to, you know, what is there a difference there? How does that work?
Well, I think, you know, for us, we're definitely, well, we're granting a license for a limited period of time. I mean, just to get back to what Carrie was saying, you know, the amounts and sort of like varieties of sort of requests, I'm sure everybody, A2IM members are seeing, you know, is pretty bonkers. I mean, we've got a lot of new, you know, at-home sessions. It seems that every media company in the world wants to be behind the at-home sessions. That's taken a turn in the last few weeks to commercial brands such as, you know, Burberry and Belstaff and whoever else wants to get involved in, you know, asking for at-home sessions. We're also getting a lot of requests from festivals to have virtual events using old material that they have in their vaults, as well as, you know, the labels and the artists themselves wanting to repurpose material. So in all cases for us, because we've sort of like taken this area pretty seriously for a long time, we tend to sort of like have an exclusive license, you know, we tend to have exclusive recording deals with our artists. So we're involved in, you know, every conversation to do with someone pointing and recording our artists, whether they're existing masters or new versions.
Yeah, and to maybe add to what Ruth is saying, I think there's a difference when, you know, an artist at home right now especially is recording something on their own equipment, mixes something themselves, creates a recording, and then lets others use it, versus an artist showing up at a studio or a session, or even being recorded, you know, live on some platform, where an argument can be made that that platform or that engineer at that studio or that session owns the copyright. And what's been interesting during this time is we're getting a lot of platforms that used to be studios or used to record the you know, artists performing live and handle all the production, asking instead for artists to deliver product. And I feel like in that, you know, change of how they work, there's room for there being a different discussion about what the rights are when they are receiving something that's already produced.
I'd like to chime in on that the end user license agreement on the platform becomes very important in determining how the rights are shifted or owned in a case like that.
Thank you. So, I mean, obviously we've seen this gigantic sort of paradigm shift in the last couple of months because of the COVID-19 situation, but I mean, I know none of us have a crystal ball, but are any of you feeling like this is going to become somewhat permanent and change the landscape for good?
I mean, I think the landscape's already shifted, to be honest. And I keep on saying to people, I don't feel like, you know, live is going to recover. I think it's going to take a lot longer than people think. But I think what we've identified is there's an ancillary business here, and a really serious ancillary business that's a great opportunity for labels and the artists, and even the live music community as well. You know, so often over the years, I just think that people waste the assets that they're creating. Giving them away for free, sort of like creating this free ecosystem, has never been my vibe at all. You know, it just seems like a real waste. And it almost feels like we, as exclusive recording, you know, agreement holders, you know, it's like we're neglecting the rights that we actually have. And I think that there's just a big opportunity. How that sort of like, I mean, I think that's going to transpire over the next few weeks. I think that people are going to, you know, at the moment we're very much in a free content for a good cause. You know, in this charitable era, you know, there's donation buttons and really great causes that people, that artists are doing this stuff for. But I think that we need to sort of like move into the unabashed, let's not be ashamed of the fact that there is commercial business here. There are lots of platforms that I think are poking their heads above the parapets that are offering real solutions to people. So, you know, sorry, I'll go off on one there, but Rich, going back to your original question, yes, the landscape's changed. And, you know, I'm not seeing this as being replacement to live. I think in the short term it is. But ultimately, I think it's another opportunity for artists to engage with audiences across territories, you know, make one thing go further. And I think that's really, really positive, you know, positive point to be at.
Yeah, thank you. Are there major positives from your point of view? I mean, the globalization of a performance is one potential positive, right? From a label's point of view, is that something you're thinking about at all? You can reach a much wider.
Yeah, I mean, and the artists, I think, should be too. I mean, the fact that there are these platforms you are able to sort of like, you know, gather audiences, capacity goes out the window on a live stream, right? You know, all you've got to worry about is the time zone and the, you know, platform's ability to hold numbers. You know, I think there was that Post Malone stream the other week from the Nirvana. I mean, that was incredible amount of numbers that they were doing. You know, if you could think that everyone was paying like $1, wow, that's a really great payday for him.
No question. Yeah. So when live, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to add one thing. I think even though I would agree with Ruth that the landscape is probably changed permanently on some level, but I would say that at the same time the questions are still the same, which is about the value of recordings, the value of performances, and what's being exchanged when consumers get access to performances and recordings, and when platforms, you know, offer to put that forward into the world. What are platforms giving back to performers, and rights holders support those performers? I think those questions are still the same questions we've been dealing with, you know, as an industry for many decades.
And I think when the dust settles, there is going to be some discussion about how to really distill like what is a worthwhile platform. How do we make it so that there's not oversaturation? Because another thing I'm noticing is like, how many of these live sessions can we do? I mean, how many fans are going to want to watch 100 different sessions? But I think if you can, you know, create a model where it's really well produced, it's really good value, and there's a way to monetize it, then it's a great move forward. But right now, I feel like we're all just being hit with so many requests. It's happening so fast. We're in the middle of this crazy time that it just feels very, you know, disorganized.
I don't think that, or sorry, go ahead.
No, Jason, go on.
I was just going to on the riff on the idea of how much content's out there, how many live streams. I think it goes back to the same paradigm we've been dealing with for a long time, which is we as consumers have a finite amount of entertainment time and money to spend. And there's really infinite choice, right? There's a multitude of ways to spend our time and money for entertainment that exists now that didn't exist 20 years ago, whether it's mobile games or social, you name it, live streaming. And so I think as this business model and this ecosystem of live streaming matures, it's going to come back to the same principles that have worked in television and music and other formats, that you have to be culturally significant to cut through the white noise. I don't think there's going to be a lot of money to be made in the fringes, in the long tail for individual live streams or events. you're gonna have to be culturally significant to generate the kind of the amount of volume, if you will, of users in real time or near real time to create an actual economic model that makes money.
That's a really interesting point. And I think obviously we've seen, millions generated by some of these superstars that have been live streaming, but I have actually seen smaller artists being able to sort of aggregate an audience geographically that can generate sufficient money to keep them afloat, as it were. Are you seeing that? Or Darius, Ruth, Carrie, are you seeing those kinds of
Just to that point, Richard, I mean, I disagree slightly with Jason. I don't think it's necessarily about the individual artist's sway here, about the business that I think could exist. I mean, all it would take is a promoter, trusted voices to sort of like take on this model, and then you'd have, like a new media, you'd have that endorsement business there. I think, I feel very positive that there's a business there. In what form, it takes, I think, is all to play for. I think this is like a creative conundrum for artists and sort of like entrepreneurs alike.
Yeah, I mean, we're still struggling 100 years later to get paid from records being played on radio. And so, obviously we don't want to generate a new situation like that. How do you see that working in terms of how the labels participate in this kind of stream? Because is it a straight substitute for a live gig? And do labels participate? What's your thinking on how a label participates in this or doesn't?
I've seen this very much as a license deal, as it has been all along. But what I would hope is that the festival producers come to us not with gratis waivers, but with a decent business proposal.
Right, and that's.
I think it is also potentially a substitutor for time spent listening to masters. So something to think about as a label or master owner.
Right.
Right, but I think in this time. This is just our philosophy, and I know it might be different for other members out there, but in this time, we do really see the direct connection between the live performances disappearing and this popping up to be a supportive function for the creative community. And I don't know to what extent we add value as a label if we're just creating resistance or getting in the way or creating red tape for artists to pursue what they need to do to take care of themselves, their band members, people around them. An example was recently an artist that we partner with, Angel Olsen. She did a live performance, ticketed event. Sold a few thousand tickets. It generated over $30,000. That for her to do a 3 hour, 4 hour, not even 3 hours, like a 1.5 hour performance. To generate that money, that she then took that money and she gave it to all of her bandmates. That is keeping bread on the table. That's allowing them as artists to have a sustainable career. And as labels who are partnered with artists like Angel Olsen will benefit downstream because they'll have greater capacity to create recordings that we can then promote. So right. We don't view it necessarily as an opportunity to okay, here's another revenue stream that's competing with some other revenue stream that we might have. Let's try to get a piece of that. We're more thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, how can we help Angel Olsen or other artists that we work with and partner with avoid, undervaluing themselves or, entering into bad agreements with third parties who are maybe being opportunistic. How do we view this as having our interests aligned, and the function of label now is to really be an advocate and an ombudsman for these opportunities for artists.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think that's fair. I think it's about how we add value. Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, I'd agree 100% with that sentiment, Darius. We're caretakers. We're caretakers of our rights and their rights. And I think that, this is very much what we've been involved with for a long time now on this, not letting, third parties, other businesses sort of take advantage. That's sort of like what I do get a little bit despaired sometimes that there is this culture of, you know, where the artist just is the content provider, and there's sort of like and this is when I talk about an unashamed conversation about the commercialities around this. You know, this is what I want the conversation to go towards, because I think that this is exactly what you said. Artists need to see the value of this content. They're not seeing that enough. There's still, it's always the gratis conversation. It's always the, we'll give you some coverage. Well, actually, you wouldn't have any coverage if you didn't have the content. And we need to sort of like be having this conversation with our artists and getting them to see, you know, I don't think that, you know, like I said earlier in the conversation, sometimes I feel very avaricious, sort of like pointing it towards this commercial conversation. But, you know, but the fact is, this is a business, and this content has value.
Right. Look, we're lucky because our artists are so generous and they want to participate. And I've been really humbled by how much they want to help. But like, you know, I've had so many examples where the artist is like wanting to put a live recording on a compilation that's going to benefit a venue and a soup kitchen and all these places, but with no part of it going to benefit the artist, which is amazing that our artists want to do it. But at some point I'm like, you know, our artists are suffering maybe even the most of any of these people, because they're not touring for a very long period of time.
And particularly, you know, like in Angel's, you know, example, it's the band members, you know, the non-signed artists who, you know, are out on the road, and the crew and all that sort of stuff.
That's a big consideration. It was something when we were working on the CARES Act that was really important, that the band members and the crew can't really make money doing live streams, even if there is money to be made. So do you have boundary conditions for labels to waive rights or to license for little or no compensation? Is it a formal sort of system that you use, or do you just play it by ear each time?
We try to have strict rules. I mean, it's actually not that different than the live recording requests we do during festival season. We try to keep it very limited to maybe, you know, one live stream or maybe one repeat. We're being a little bit more vigilant on trying to just be consistent because we're getting such a high volume. But the difference here, I would say, usually one of the things we're really concerned about is approvals. We're a little less concerned about that right now because the artists are providing this content, so we don't have to like get into that kind of stuff, and we're trying to really make it obviously clear that we own the content, because there would be no argument that they own the content. Our artists are producing it at their own homes and, you know, giving it to them. So we've been able to stay pretty consistent with our terms, but we have a lot of platforms who want to really push it further, push it as far as they can get.
Right.
Not much to my chagrin. I'm being more flexible than I'd want to be, but I think the you know, the times needs must and all that. But I'm doing some extra sort of like vigilancy just on you know, yes, the artists are providing the material, but I'm trying to get it in our system to make sure it's registered repertoire, and so we're doing a lot of that. Really sorry, the you know, assets people who work in the business, but all that really boring back end stuff I'm trying to sort of like get covered as well, just to, you know, make sure that if people are ripping, then there's still sort of like a, you know, there's still a paper trail or a data trail there.
Right. Are we seeing the whole live streaming experience change in the sense of more time shifting, more archiving, that kind of thing, more brand exploitation? Nothing?
They always try.
With the point Carrie made was, you know, with some of the platforms too, just it's part of the new technology that's there. Instagram stories, you know, shifting that's happening. So I think we're seeing a lot. Go on, Jason. You're the expert.
I was just going to say, you know, I think we're in relative alignment with artists. You know, I think we all view them as partners. It's really the platforms that I think a lot about, right? And think about how the platforms are using the content, what they own, what are their rights, and how do we make sure as a community of rights holders, labels, artists, we ensure that value is not sort of irreparably transferred to platforms. You know, if they're using this to drive usership, to drive time on site, to drive other metrics of enterprise value, I think we need to think about that. And do we as a community, artists included, participate in that? And I think that all of us on this call and in the community generally would rather see platforms that are licensed, platforms that pay in the appropriate ways for the rights that are involved. so that it becomes a sustainable business practice beyond maybe the charitable component of the current COVID situation.
Right. Are we seeing any of that on the horizon? Are you guys seeing any prospect of monetizing
I think
in that manner?
we're in a bit of a rock and a hard place for the reasons that we've explained at the moment, but it is very disheartening to see sort of like artist managers and the labels that we represent sort of like running towards these unlicensed platforms, because it's just frustrating, because it's a bit of a shock horror, because you're thinking, oh my god, you're just really putting us in a bad position when it comes to talking about the deals. But I think that we as a community really need to, I hate to use the A word, but aggressively sort of like start pressurizing these platforms who are our everyday partners to start sort of like legitimizing these rights. I've got a big bee in my bonnet about Twitch at the moment, because it's owned by Amazon, and they're actively going about promoting the service for music, knowing full well that music isn't covered there. Even when I think there was a bit of a flurry of excitement with announcements that Facebook would be offering paywalling or a payment mechanism the other day, only for us to find out that music's not included in that. So, it's just a frustrating time. But I think the people who have those conversations are aware of them. We just need to keep the pressure up.
Yeah.
This is the time to plug Merlin, I think, right? We as rights holders coming together to collectively bargain with platforms, and I think that will help platforms think more seriously about this.
Well,
there's one silver lining I was going to add, that in the past we've gotten a lot of pressure from artists to jump at opportunities like this because it's promotion maybe for their live performances at venues. Now there aren't the live performances at venues that artists can monetize their careers at. So I do think there is a little bit of shifting in the conversations we're having with artist managers and artists, like, oh wow, wait, yes, it is important to monetize these live streams. This is increasingly a part of how we have a sustainable career. So even though it's much more complicated, than it's been before, and there's a great volume of these requests that we're dealing with now as labels, I think in a way we've become more aligned with artists on some of these issues.
Yeah, so the whole promotion argument sort of, the bottom's fallen out of that, really, because radio used to say it was promoting sales, and then sales went away, and then they said they were promoting tours, and now tours have gone away. So, what are you promoting at this point? The stream, whether it's live or otherwise, is the sale, isn't it? So that
That's right.
Doesn't hold much water anymore. At the same time,
we ask our artists to use YouTube for that reason, because it is at least partially monetized.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a very good point. So there's one question came in from a viewer. I'm seeing a lot of artists performing cover songs while streaming. What are the thoughts about that? What are the complications when your artists do cover songs? Does that make problems for you guys? Or for them?
I think it's a problem for the platform, not so much for a label. I think we're careful. Carrie, you should speak to how when we do clear rights, how we do so.
Yeah, we just make it clear we're not clearing any publishing.
Yeah, so that's entirely up to the platform. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. I think you mentioned re-recording restrictions before, and I don't think we dug into that very much. But so do these live streams in any way impinge on your ban on re-recording restrictions for whatever period you restrict them for in your contracts?
Yeah, technically. If they're being released for commercial purposes. So it kind of depends on. Of course, we are the label, so we're negotiating it. So once it's coming through us, if they did it on their own, it would be in breach of their agreement. But it is an important point too that maybe we're not talking about as much here, is that at what point, if there's so much content from our artists in other places, are listeners not going to go to Spotify? They're not going to go to Apple. They're going to go to these other platforms to get their hit of our artist.
Right.
Jason touched on that earlier, and it's very much on my mind, is that airtime. You know, there's that old cliche, if there's an hour of people consuming music a day, if we're lucky with all the competition in the other entertainment industries and leisure industries, we sort of like need it to be the stuff that, you know, helps us to keep the lights on.
Right.
So I've often, you know, this stuff is substitutional, it is varied. Some of it's great, a lot of it not. You know, I had an artist on tour a couple of years back. I always used to say, well, they've just agreed to 35 live streams in a row. What makes that show special? What, you know, who's going to tune in? What when they get to Brazil, what's the point of that? Because everyone's seen that set 35 times.
Right.
Yeah, these are ongoing issues that have been, you know, around for a long time.
Well, one of the things that came up in the past with similar kinds of issues that we've talked about is the idea that these things become confusing in terms of search engines. So if they are archiving these live streams, are you running across any problems where people are searching for a particular track by an artist and it keeps bringing up the wrong versions or anything like that? Or is that not a problem for you?
I mean, this is, you know, I think this has been an ongoing issue for a long time, you know, particularly when it comes to the promotional activity. I mean, you know, if you do a search on YouTube, for example, you know, it will be radio sessions that come up first before official videos, for sure.
Which I think.
Go ahead, Darius.
I was going to say, I think that's why it's just important generally. You know, it depends on the nature of your agreement with the recording artist you partner with, but generally, really to be focused on the time frame a usage can occur.
Right.
If you limit that time frame, if you can, you know, be lucky to say, hey, it's only be 24 hours or 48 hours or 1 week, then at some point it becomes, you know, gone and not available to the public, and you don't have all of that volume of subpar material out there that is confusing the marketplace as far as what is the quality recording that your artist is known for. I do think there's a whack-a-mole aspect there, though, too, because some platforms are not good at taking down. You have to follow up with them. You know, the more you can pay attention to that time aspect, the more you can attack the problem that Ruth is describing.
Right.
I think your point, Richard, is very well made, though, that SEO is becoming increasingly important. And when you think about things like radio and driving purchasing behavior or revenue, there's an increasingly lower correlation. So we need to think about that. And we've seen examples going, again, all the way back to the early YouTube examples where there was an unofficial or an unlicensed or a non-label created piece of content uploaded to the platform that met all of the search algorithms requirements to be the top result, right? Whether it was viewership velocity or metadata or other inbound, outbound linking or otherwise. And that can definitely be challenging. You know, luckily, in the sense of Google and YouTube, they created a vibrant ecosystem with lots of tools for tracking and monetizing our rights, but that's kind of unique. That doesn't really exist anywhere else. So I think your point is extremely valid.
Well, thank you. We're starting to get a bunch of questions coming, so I'm going to look at some of these. And one question was how are your labels handling Twitch, since licensing there isn't really in place? Is there obviously we have to be careful what we say here, but you know, is there a generalized approach to services that are not licensed or not fully licensed yet?
I mean, very generally, and you know, I think that we're having to be flexible on a lot of things at the moment. I think, you know, that point remains.
And I think, and Jason, you know, maybe about this a little bit more. I think with Twitch, because it's owned by Amazon, there is some tie-in to Amazon agreements with regards to music that's identifiably performed on Twitch. But I'm not sure how that's technically implemented.
Yeah, and there are conversations happening with Twitch. You know, we'll see where that goes. It's not a platform that is completely uninterested in working with the community. There's definitely potential there.
Yeah, no, they definitely want to be friends with us. So it's a good sign for sure. So I have an interesting question here.
On that, Richard, I think just one last thing. I think Twitch is too big not to deal with this at some point. As we've seen, with Peloton, paying a lot in legal fees to clean up some of their licensing issues. I think at some point, Twitch is going to have to resolve its licensing issues.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Thank you for that. One interesting sort of futuristic question. Could this be a time when there's an accelerated demand for VR online live music streaming? I'm kind of a VR fan, so I like this question, but
I'm a VR naysayer. Until it looks like the holodeck from Star Trek Next Generation, I'm not interested. It's all a bit clunky, but yeah, I mean, to answer the question, yeah, I mean, it could accelerate demand. Obviously, the hardware is a big part of that, and sort of like, democratizing that side of things to actually give people a good experience. But yeah, I mean, obviously with this VR stuff as well, you do need to get people in venues and have about 1,000 cameras, and that's not really going to be possible right now, is it?
No, that's right.
Speaking of VR, I'd like to call out Darius's aliens background. Beautiful.
And the holodeck may not be as far away as you think, by the way. Another question about the Travis Scott Fortnite concert and the idea that indie artists working with game platforms. I mean, well, obviously Twitch is a good example of that, but any thoughts on that? Just these hybrid platforms that are occurring?
This is, I think, a big opportunity. We've done a little bit of work in the area. Obviously, there's precedent for giant audiences. You have giant user bases playing these games. I think this is an area we need to pay special attention to. I'm a proponent, as an attorney by training, for a licensing paradigm involving any kind of live performance. I'm writing a white paper on this that I'll share at some point. And I think video gaming and monetizing that user base in that environment is a really big opportunity for artists, labels, and rights holders.
Thank you. There's another question about sponsored live streams. Have you guys had any experience with sponsored live streams rather than sort of ticket sales or putting out the hat for tips? Have you come across this? It seems like a potential there.
Very few.
Very few.
I think we've had one or two.
Yeah.
There are fees sort of like floating around, but they're very much, quite low level. I mean, what has been nice actually, some, traditional promotional partners have actually come up with fees for artists for live streams over the last few weeks, which I think is a really good look for those, right. Rather than coming for the gratis license, because, I think that just goes ways to supporting the artist. And I think that's really important at this time.
Yeah.
Right.
And, I do like to commend Bandcamp, when platforms do step up and say, we're also going to forego the piece that we're earning. I feel like that's in the right spirit. And whereas there are other platforms who are still trying to rake a little bit from the donation aspect, and that doesn't feel right.
I think it was incredible that what they did, and they raised a huge amount of money too, which was amazing. So yes, couldn't agree with you more. I have an interesting question here. Will Facebook pay master rights holders for usage during live streams? Do you know the answer to that? Whether that falls under that Facebook deal?
As far as I'm aware, they're not covered under the license, but I could be wrong there. But as far as I'm aware, it's not covered under the license, because the license that we have live streaming, yeah, it doesn't involve third parties. But I might be misquoting there.
Yeah.
Are you talking about new recordings or existing recordings, Richard?
For live stream recording. So so if you're actually doing a live stream, then will it pay on that live stream? That's how the question is phrased.
I think because it's not delivered into your Facebook deal as your content cleanly, it's unlikely that there'd be some mechanism for you to monetize off of live streams that are happening out there in the marketplace.
Yeah. Have you ever participated in anything like that where you've taken a live stream and delivered it? You archived it and delivered it.
It's a practice with YouTube. If there's an extraordinary live recording, on YouTube, you capture the audio and then redistribute it. So re-deliver it into YouTube so it shows up on your CMS, and then claim monetization on that video. It's something that some labels do spend resource trying to manage.
Right. Yeah. I was wondering in terms of live streams. I mean, one thing, well, to your point before, that it's often not recorded that well, and the artist is doing the recording themselves. That's a negative. But the positive side is it's a very different take on that artist's music. Are you seeing any kind of interest in that? Because it's a very different reading of that particular piece of music when you get an artist sitting on their couch playing it on an acoustic guitar or piano or something.
Or Phoebe Bridgers playing in her bathtub on Jimmy Kimmel.
Yeah,
that kind of thing is interesting. I guess the question will be for us culturally is, after it's done over and over and over again in this new motif, when does it stop becoming interesting? It's interesting to see some of the biggest bands we work with that have big productions strip it down. That's interesting. But is it interesting when they've done it a 35th time? That's sort of what we're going to have to contend with as an industry, and artists as much as labels. And one sharp manager that I had a conversation about this week with, he shared his perspective that when he's looking at these live stream opportunities, he's really invested in having it be time capped. He wants it gone after 24 hours, because to the extent this is going to be replacing his live performance revenue business plan for the artist, he wants there to be demand in other markets for these performances, and for consumers not to be able to go to YouTube to see the same performance. So there is sort of a investment, or how can I say it? The artist managers and the artists also want this to be limited, so there isn't such a glut in the marketplace.
Yeah, scarcity drives value. When we acquire, we have less exclusive recording agreements and more in the way of masters that we own or have acquired. And we typically have a covenant against re-recording because scarcity drives value. And I think in the case that Darius is talking about, scarcity also can drive value. I think you also need to think about, both as a label and an artist, the artist's brand perception in the market, right? A brand signals quality of a certain type to a certain audience. And some artists do it very well endemically on their own. Other artists, not so much. They need assistance to keep the perceived level of quality high. And if they consistently don't do things that essentially meet the quality standard of their brand, it can actually degrade their brand. So that's another angle to think about, in addition to scarcity versus everything ever made being out there.
I think that's an important point that you make there, Jason. So are you seeing any kind of bias in terms of genres as to artists who are doing very well with live streams, or is it pretty much across the board?
I don't have any particular metrics or examples to share across different genres. I'm thinking of a couple of negative examples that I don't really want to share publicly, but let's just say in some of the urban genres, if quality control is not paid attention to, I think I've personally seen a long-term degradation of audience engagement and brand perception.
That's interesting.
I'd agree that there are definitely artists who are not going to be good at live streaming, not comfortable with it. But the ones that are, getting back to Darius's point about the sitting in a bedroom doing the same thing of 500 times, what have you, for millions of different partners. I think that's getting back to my earlier point about, it's a creative conundrum. It's a thing for them to sort of like go away or a creative challenge for them to come up and sort of like try to test the boundaries of the platforms and the the format, which could make it really interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I imagine what we'll see is some artists emerge that are really, really good at this medium, right? And we're probably seeing that already. I may not be aware. Do you have any examples of that, or?
I know Phoebe Bridgers has been down to do a lot of different types of live recordings, and I think her desire to just like do everything and be involved is seen as making her very relatable by her fan base. Like, they really appreciate that. I also know Kevin Morby and Katie Crutchfield from Waxahachie have done a lot of really great live streaming that they've actually done on their own platforms, which I really like. They're doing it on their own Instagram, like going live with fans and stuff. I think that those people who are really engaging with not just like passively doing, but doing it in a way where they're engaging with their fans, it's been a really positive experience.
Yeah. We've had quite a lot of artists actually sitting on the format for now because they're trying to work out the best way to do it so it sort of like stands out. It's probably, yeah, there's a very interesting sort of like mainstream American opportunity coming up for us in the next few weeks, which I think is very, very beautiful and intimate and sort of like really enhances the format and what it can do.
Excellent. So I think we're coming to an end here unless you have anything else to add, but one question I would like to ask you is, do you see this as a net positive for our industry or negative?
I mean, I'm going to say positive.
I guess I'll take that, or go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm going to say positive because it's sort of what I do every day and have done for quite a long time. So, you know, and I'm seeing it as a positive that it's on people's minds. I'm seeing it a positive that there are possibilities here. I would never be, you know, I'm not unkind enough to the live music community I've worked with for a very long time to think this is going to replace them. I actually see this as a positive to actually wanting them to work together more closely with us. I remain hippie about that and you know, hope it to be so.
Jason, you were going to say something? Or?
Yeah, I agree. I think it absolutely can be a positive on the condition that everybody agrees to work together. I think that if people start trying to hoard value for themselves, then it becomes much more problematic and we start thinking about substitutors and time allocations. But if everybody works together, I think, again, just to use the analogy for the third time, this is YouTube 2006. It's potentially a really big, very large ecosystem for everybody.
So let me ask that then. Are we optimistic about everybody working together? Are we feeling like the writing's on the wall that everyone really wants us to work for everybody?
You know, you can only hope.
Yeah.
But to echo what Ruth and Jason are saying, 15, 20 years ago, we were threatened by Napster and peer-to-peer file sharing, and we've come through the other side of it. And it's interesting or almost ironic how now what is saving the music industry is the internet, both from subscription streaming that's happening, but also now on the live performance industry aspect of it, there is an alternative that exists now. Just think about if this happened 10 years ago even, there wouldn't be this live streaming opportunity to make up some of the lost ground of bands not being able to perform live anymore.
Right.
So
it's proving the value of the content. And like Ruth was talking about earlier, when we get these festival requests in the summer and they don't want to pay a fee, I think now we can really point to it and be like, no, people want to watch these and they will watch them. And there is value. And that's even a better situation because the artist is getting paid for the performance and then also the label is getting the license fee for.
It's convincing those third parties, you know, it's convincing those big promoters that there's an ancillary business for them there too, as well as for the artists. And I think that, you know, people are saying that live music community, the live music community are having their Napster moment. Let's just hope that they learn from it and sort of like want to deal with the paperwork, because that's always been the problem with that side of the industry. You know, it's very old-fashioned like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to finish on, by the way, because I do think it is amazing, looking back 20 years, how what almost destroyed us is actually really enabling us to rise above this terrible thing that's happening in the world right now. And, you know, I appreciate the positivity of that thought as well. And definitely, I think all of our hearts go out to the live industry and venues and promoters and, you know, the physical world, the independent retail stores and so on. And, you know, anything we can do to help lift the entire industry up, because we are an ecosystem and we do best when we work together, as Jason pointed out, as several of you have pointed out in this conversation. Is there anything else any of you want to add at the end of this about live streaming or about anything else for that matter before we end?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Richard, for moderating. This is a great conversation.
Well, thank you very much for participating. We really appreciate it. And I want to thank Darius Van Arman, Jason Peterson, Ruth Barlow, and Carrie Boston for taking the time to do this. I hope it was valuable to all of you listening. And I'll remind you again that we have Indie Week coming up from June 15th to June 18th. It's going to be packed with featured speakers and keynote speeches and panels, roundtables, one-on-ones. It's going to be as good as it can possibly be in the virtual. And I know we're all going to miss the actual person-to-person networking that we can do there. But at the same time, I think that this is going to be an exciting opportunity for us, and hopefully it'll expand our ability to reach around the globe for the independent sector. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all for the next Indiscussion.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.